Welcome back to Reimagine 2020. I'm Yonah Hochhauser, and today I'm glad to be joined by Ingamar Ramirez, writer, self-described Daoist, and podcaster. Ingamar, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Yonah.
Well, first, give our audience a little background on kind of who you are and how you got into blockchain.
I got into blockchain kind of on accident. I was a freelance digital marketer and happened upon a potential client who needed help, and he asked me, "Do you know what ICOs are?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Have you heard of Bitcoin or Ethereum?" I was like, "Sort of." And then what ensued after was just tons of curiosity and research and absorption into white papers and Reddit, and all these exchanges and all these coins with different logos and promises and things like that. And I'm from New York, so there's a lot of meetups, and I think the meetups they really got me into that vibe of like decentralization and revolutionizing finance. So then that was where I made my friends.
And when you talk about meetups in New York, did it happen to be describing Crypto Mondays?
Yeah, that was certainly one of them.
Yeah.
That's a great, New York is so huge, and during 2017, 2018, there were meetups in New York every day of the week. There were multiple competing events, and it just seems like such a long time ago because the meetup scene is sort of desolate now for obvious reasons.
Yeah. And although some are trying to become more remote and more VR based, I'm seeing a lot of interesting solutions, and we're going to get into DAOs, and you're a big proponent of DAOs, and so is Lou Kerner, a good friend of mine who started Crypto Mondays, doing some interesting things over there. But you're also a podcaster. I believe it's Top of the Block podcast.
Yep.
Amongst others. Yeah. So my question is this: are all the good blockchain puns already used up? I mean, you got Top of the Block, you got pretty much a word on the block. I mean, is all the good blockchain puns used up, and is there more to come?
Probably. I know it's how many unique names can you come up with that have the word block in it, or chain, or coin, or Bitcoin? So yeah, they're kind of running out, but hopefully new trends come up that open up some new words, new terminologies.
Well, we're here to speak about DeFi, but also DAOs. So tell me a little bit, or viewers who maybe not be familiar with what a DAO is, kind of what a DAO is and what its promise holds.
Yeah, a DAO, I guess, in the context of blockchain, it's a decentralized, autonomous organization. People around the world, a collective, governing typically a treasury and a smart contract wallet that no single person can touch, and funds can be moved in and out of this treasury through consensus. When there's a proposal that people vote on, and when there's consensus, it passes, funds are unlocked, and they're delivered to whichever individual address that is proposed. And a lot of collectives or groups who work together, money comes up a lot, and the governance of that money kind of determines the fate of these groups and companies to an extent. So the DAO is kind of a way to keep things transparent and decentralized and public, and democratic in many ways, so that peers can come together and self-govern in such a way that doesn't require a king or a president or any kind of centralized leadership or control. And I think humans are capable of that, working together.
All right. And you are a part of a dxDAO. Well, what is dxDAO, and what separates it from other DAOs?
Yeah, dxDAO is a collective that grows, develops, and governs DeFi products and protocols. So that's kind of what they do, more or less. They're very, very pro decentralization, very purist about it. Every step of the way, every process must be managed in, a decentralized way. So why is that the case? I guess it was sparked as an idea between DAO Stack and Gnosis. This was before I came on board about a year ago, so I may get some facts a little different, of having like this decentralized collective be birthed and kind of grow on its own and exist in such a way that it can move, think, and create however way it wants. And a few members came on board, I think at the beginning of this year, that really took that idea on and just kind of, they just took it and ran. And the idea was to start with governing a product from Gnosis called Mesa, which is a front end built on the Gnosis protocol, and start a fundraiser so that it can actually have capital to get developers building things for the DAO. And I came around that time to sort of just write a piece on that, and I had some extra time because of like COVID and companies closing and clients shutting down and things like that. And I just wanted to focus on things that I was interested in and also learn stuff. So the best way for me to learn is like writing about it. And so I was writing about this capital raise, and the expectations were very, very humble, and it just sort of took off on the internet of this DAO raising funds and making that more or less open to the public. And expectations were exceeded by astronomical proportions, I must say. And then that kind of generated a lot of interest from different online communities, and for the better, I would say. We got a lot of people participating in governance calls and forum posts and submitting ideas for products and better ways to govern the community. And there are people who show up at least a dozen on average on these daily calls on products, on development, on business development, weekly updates, product specific calls. And it's very, very active, and it's very, very strongly knit and secure. And the way that it uses the DAO Stack governance framework, it kind of separates the governance into two tokens, basically. So there's a token for like stakeholders, and there's a non-transferable token, which is specifically for governance, and it's not fungible. You can't send it anywhere. It's just voting power for voting on proposals for the DAO. So those who participated early, they got that governing power, but it's not something that you can just like sell later. It's really there for people who are interested in voting and becoming part of this collective. So it's a lot different from other platforms that have a token that you can buy that gives you power. It's broken up separately. And I think
that was going to be my question, where and I guess you addressed it for dxDAO, but for DAOs in general, it essentially couldn't. It starts off democratic. Everyone who has a token could vote, but couldn't someone then just buy up a large portion of tokens and essentially centralize again the organization?
Yeah, that can happen. Some of these platforms out there strictly have like power equals how much money you put into the platform. So and I guess the DAO Stack framework kind of protects against anyone just swooping in, buying power and then just changing how the whole system works. So voting power within this particular DAO and DAO Stack DAOs, it's more earned thing than it is a bought thing.
So how does that earning work?
Yeah. Well, the cool thing is like for the dxDAO, like anybody can submit a proposal. Anybody with a good idea can say, hey, I think this should happen, and these are the terms, and here are some ideas, and this is how much I think it would cost. So I'm proposing this much to be released from the treasury, and here you go. But just making a proposal doesn't mean that it'll get passed. So it's still up to the voters to vote on it. But I think the really cool feature is that anyone can come in and just like share an idea. And I think, you know, that falls within the ethos of like the dxDAO, open discourse, you know, transparency. Let's make everything public. Let's not make decisions behind closed doors. Let's all have a discussion about it. So I think that answered your question more or less.
Well, so how does it earn it? Let's say I bring a great proposal.
Yeah.
You guys vote on it that we want to do it. Are you also voting on how much, you know, how does the earning work? What happens for me?
Yeah. So with these proposals, like, you know, sometimes like you can propose like, hey, I'm Yonah, and I would love to create this beautiful NFT art piece for the dxDAO, and I'm proposing 1 Ether and 0.1% voting power if I submit this to the DAO, and it's like it becomes their mascot logo or something like that. So we look at it, we discuss. All right, sounds good. We vote for it. It passes. You do get some reputation, voting power for your proposal succeeding. And then after that, like you would get whichever funds or additional voting power that you asked for. And that would be how it worked. And then you'd be able to, from there on, vote on other proposals. So
essentially, in order to get voting power in the dxDAO, you either had to be there at the beginning and been there at the beginning to have it, or now earn it through various proposals that are approved. More or less,
yeah. And like, in the beginning, like you had to earn it too in certain ways, but there was an initial vote staking period, and it involved multiple ways to get voting power on the genesis of the DAO. I wasn't around then, but it did involve like bidding for voting power with tokens or staking Ether and other things like that. So it was earned in a sense, but probably more like monetarily based at that time. But now it's kind of like, it does involve like communication and conversation in order to like propose ideas and then get rewarded for them. And the rewards always come with voting power.
Yeah, but how is that voting power? You mentioned it's non-transferable these days, but you can't really make it non-transferable. You could just, someone could just off chain buy, you know, the wallet address from you or wherever you're storing. You know, it's just not on chain transferable.
Well, I think with certain smart contract wallets, you actually could transfer it in a way that is actually like you don't have it anymore. But you know, the way Ethereum wallets work, if you paid me for my private key and I copy and paste it and send it to you, like I still have it. You know, so now it's just two of us have control of this wallet. So.
I got you. There really isn't. It's tougher to actually hand over the key and not allow them to do it. Interesting. Now, so then, to what degree would you say that dxDAO is completely decentralized?
In what way? I would say with the treasury, I think it is very like secure and safe and transparent. You see what goes in, you see what comes out, you see what proposals are out there. You can find where the discussions are. You can show up to any call that you want. There is no waiting room. You can just go in, listen, talk. So I think it's a decentralized community that anyone can join. The doors are always open. You can participate as much as you want. I think that's one of its strengths because it is a very large one. There's over 400 ETH addresses with voting power, and you know, at least a dozen people showing up on these calls, and there's you know, dozens of people in these chats, and there's dozens of chat channels for each product and venture. So a lot of it spread out. It is like not the most streamlined thing. It is kind of chaotic, but it is very strongly functional. We've got like 4 products right now. 2 of them are coming out this month, and you know, things are getting done really, really fast. So fundraising was done in May, you know, and we have two products basically out, and 2 more looking to be released this month. So you don't often see like other startups moving at such a quick rate.
And so you guys are essentially playing the role of kind of decentralized, a decentralized run VC fund, let's say, for the DeFi space, where you're kind of allocating funds for development and for the improvement. But when you're doing this in the traditional world, when you're giving funds for development and things like that in the traditional world, you're getting equity in return. So the success of that development rewards you with financial gain.
Sure.
Here in dxDAO and DAOs in general, but specifically dxDAO, where you're choosing what to invest in, voting on it democratically, the project succeeds. Where's the financial incentive for the voters? Do you guys hold some sort of equity? Do you receive a reward from the project somehow?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and there have been like a few threads on the topic of like, what is rep? What is this voting power? Because rep by itself, you can't really sell it for anything. But also, like, people with rep, if they have consensus, they have power over what happens to this $12+ million treasury. So in a sense, the closest thing to equity, quote unquote, for the dxDAO would be like rep, but it is a very strange asset that is like not too familiar from what we like know and are used to. So that would be like the closest thing.
And right now there's a $12 million dollar fund essentially. How does that grow? Is that stuck? Is there a way of growing that fund, and what would be the incentive to, like, if I now go to the dxDAO and say, hey, I'm willing to put in another $1 million if you give me this equivalent to reputation? Is that kind of how you intend to grow the fund?
So there is a DX Trust, basically a page where you can go and check out and become a stakeholder if you'd like, because it's a continuous offering, also like a very unique thing that the dxDAO is doing. And those stakeholders, basically, their only stakeholdership is a portion of future revenues based on buyback and burn. There currently is no way to directly purchase this voting power. And I understand that a lot of emphasis gets put on the voting power, and some assume that it takes voting power to get things done. But you know, I started off with 0 voting power and was able to get proposals passed, and I've seen other people do it. So it doesn't necessarily take like voting power to necessarily grow and change the dxDAO. Like, if it's a community of voters that are present, then like an idea will pass, you know, and anybody can submit an idea.
Wow. And you know, in your view, I mean, this all technology is still very new, and this whole idea of DAOs, you know, is still relatively new, and it's a very young technology. With dxDAO, and like you said, this has grown beyond your wildest dreams. You know, the beginnings were very humble. Have DAOs reached their potential, their full potential? Is this kind of you know, all right, this is what DAOs will do. Let's try to make the most of it. We just dictate the flow of funds and kind of this system. Are they even close? Will it end up being something totally different? Yeah. The real potential with this technology?
Yeah, I think we're still kind of, like, not to be cliche, but like we're definitely scratching the surface of what this can do. And I think that, you know, DAOs, it makes sense because of the proximity to DeFi and blockchain, that a lot of the DAOs focus on blockchain related matters. There are like gamer based DAOs, there are you know, sorority DAOs, there's legal DAOs, and you know, like dxDAO focuses mostly on DeFi, and like the DeFi products are kind of the heart of the collective. There's also investor-based DAOs. It would be really cool if, like, in a few years we see DAOs that are more real world, like I don't know, like maybe like an after school program that had a DAO, so they could have funding, so they can buy supplies and things like that, and organize community events. That would be really cool.
Yeah, because that's the interesting thing, where essentially most democratic decisions in our lives in the Western world, at least, is kind of a delegation system, you know, representative system, delegation system, where kind of, you know, everyone doesn't have time to vote on every decision. So I'll vote once for my representative, who I think will then vote the way I want for many decisions. And so, and like you mentioned, after school programs, there's a PTA, you know, parent teacher association, where you elect, you know, or you choose your parent representative, and you assume that they're going to allocate the funds the way you want it. And then that kind of then goes back to this question of DAOs, where, let's say with DeFi, okay, you're dealing with decentralized products. It probably makes sense to have decentralized solutions, but when we're looking at DAOs as a whole, is the one-for-one vote, is that totally decentralized decision-making, non-delegation system, but a purely vote-for-vote system, is that the best system in all situations? You know, my question is what situations is it better to have decentralized leadership? Right. And what situations is it better when, you know, to have a more centralized leadership that does have its pros in times of crisis or other?
Yeah, sure. Wow, yeah, tons of things I could address. I think that, all right, so one, I think there are talks of the dxDAO potentially becoming like a delegate for other DeFi related products, such as like Compound has that capability that you're speaking of, where you can delegate voting power to other people. And the dxDAO has, you know, brought up the idea of, like, it would be cool if, like, the dxDAO could help govern Compound if people were willing to kind of stake their voting power to the dxDAO. You know, if given, like, the dxDAO is like a trusted and transparent, like, group of people who are knowledgeable about decentralized governance. So I think it would be a capable representative. In terms of, like, one-to-one voting power, so the way the dxDAO works, different all addresses have, like, their own, like, percentage of voting power. So some might have 1% voting power, some might have 0.05. So I guess not all voters are like, you know, equally given the same amount of power. And typically the ones who contribute a lot end up getting a lot of voting power. So it is kind of meritocratic in that sense.
And is that kind of the goal? Because, you know, I guess the dream is a fair system. Everyone wants the fairest system. So, you know, obviously there are obviously issues with the delegation system. Even if you guys were to go delegated, then once you get delegation, it becomes political. Then, so, you know, you'll do things to get votes. And then, so there are major issues with that. And also there are issues with the one-to-one system, where, you know, not everyone is so knowledgeable. You know, MIT released a report on the idea on DAOs that they said the idea of entrusting the masses with important financial decisions is a bad one, and one that isn't likely to yield any returns. And they said that they said in the report, they said the world will have to change for the DAO-related projects to succeed on any scale. And I think the idea is that, you know, there is kind of there is faults in all these systems. You know, one-to-one voting, where someone might not be very knowledgeable on this topic, especially when we're talking about, you know, sophisticated DeFi instruments. And so kind of my question is this, that what is that goal? You know, you joined dxDAO, and right now we're so early in technology that there's so much ideology, you know, still involved. So what in your view, in your eyes, what is that perfect, or that no system's perfect, but that most fair system? How would that look? How would it be implemented?
Sure. I think a fair system would involve like a proper like distribution of voting power among like 1,000 or 1,000 active members. So I guess it kind of scales with the community. If you have a small community, some people are going to have a lot of power, but sometimes like those people with the power are doing a lot for the DAO, a lot more than others. So I think the way it is now, maybe like the top 12 or 13 addresses have 50% of the voting power. So it's like not the most perfect thing, but new members are coming in and they are earning their keep within the DAO. Some are working full time, some are just like coming in, contributing and showing up. So it will be dispersed over time, and hopefully with proper incentivization, these people stay active and they stay participating because there's an incentive, there's a reason to do it. They get something out of it for their work. So I guess it's about like setting the proper incentives to keep people aligned and to keep people active.
And so you mentioned this idea of it's got to scale once the community becomes big enough. You run into less of these issues of centralized, of one person wielding too much power. How easy is it to scale this structure, especially when in order to kind of, for the dxDAO case, where in order to really become a member or really get involved, you have to contribute to the product. So essentially there is a pretty high barrier for entry, because let's say someone like me, let's say I'm interested in this technology, I'm interested in DeFi, and I kind of want to have a say in this, and I believe in this, but I don't have the tech knowledge or savvy to really submit a proposal that would be worthy. So is it really tough to scale? Is there a very high barrier to entry where you're essentially only getting developers? And is that that could be a good thing as well, because then you're only getting people in the know. So what's your take on this idea of this right. barrier to entry limited to people who have that knowledge?
Yeah, that's a totally good point, because the governance platform that we're using isn't like the simplest thing at all. It does require some hand-holding to utilize. And like, that's not even to mention the gas costs, because it can be pretty exorbitant. However, the dxDAO does require people of different skill sets, so it's not primarily developers, although it may have started that way. We do need like content creators and digital marketers and people with connections to liquidity providers, because a lot of these DeFi products, like such as DXSwap coming out, it's a fork of Uniswap with some added governance capabilities for the liquidity providers and governing fees. So that is actually going to release this month, and we need, the DAO needs people with connections to liquidity providers and people who are willing to migrate from other AMM DEXs or decentralized exchanges with automated market makers, if the incentives are like properly aligned. So, and I guess the reason for it is because like Uniswap has a lot of like hard-coded parameters that don't really allow any flexibility for the liquidity providers. And I think liquidity providers offer a lot more value and deserve a lot more power than most people think. So I guess the thesis is that if properly incentivized, like liquidity providers will go wherever they're most rewarded and most welcome in terms of like governance. And also like it's a thesis that in this open source community with great public and permissionless products, if the community does not like certain things about a certain product and someone forks it and provides like solutions to those grievances, they'll move over. And that is sort of the thesis and what the DAO is like, the dxDAO is putting out there. So we're doing our best to kind of listen to the community and see what they want and what it would take for them to migrate that liquidity and make the product a success and make everyone happy.
Right. Well, now that we're kind of on the topic, I want to hear your thoughts on the Uniswap, SushiSwap, drama. Is that, where's your stance on that? Is it good? Is it good for the community? It's kind of needed where kind of like these forks are driving also innovation, on the original. What's your, and then we can also go into the politics with Seth Nomi. But yeah.
Sure, I think in a way it's good because it's creating an open competition to best win over users and community members who are providing that value for the product. And a lot of the value for the product is like derives from the users and the community and the liquidity that is staked on there basically. So SushiSwap had a lot of promises and a lot of great incentives for people to take interest and migrate. It did suffer some speed bumps because of like that lead dev who dumped and was mysterious and so shady. However, control of that project has been transferred, I think, at this point. And I think that speaks a lot about like DeFi and decentralized communities where like usually in like the traditional world, if like a company suffers from like a very terrible leader, usually it can't recover, but it's looking like it could. So like Sushi overall is kind of like a meme with potential. Yeah. And that potential has not completely died yet because it will be having new management and like new releases and things like that. So pretty cool stuff, and it is still competing with Uniswap in many respects. So I think it's a matter of how to best keep those people there once the crazy APY percentages have kind of dissipated,
Right. Well, so you mentioned that dxSwap, will differ from Uniswap because it will offer liquidity providers also governance, and that's something that Sushi was also doing at the beginning a little bit there. Right. I think it even ends today. I think as we're speaking right now, I'm not 100% sure on that, but I believe it ends today. So how is dxSwap going to differ from Sushi? Is it just SushiSwap but managed by a DAO? So kind of taken away, like you mentioned, that Chef Nomi, lead developer, mysteriousness. Hey, do you like SushiSwap but wish that it was run decentralized? Is that kind of the pitch?
Sure. I mean, like it's basically a fork of Uniswap, and it allows for more flexibility on some of the parameters, like the liquidity provider fees and such. And there will be also like reward incentives to go along with it, but it will be managed in a way that is more realistic and sustainable. And so it's playing a longer game, I would say. And as you say, like the Sushi rewards will be heavily like decreased after a day or two. So we'll see if the community stays, if the platform is strong enough for the community to stay, and if they're properly incentivized to not move. But yeah, I think dxDAO has like a governance edge on a lot of products. So it will be a longer game.
And as someone who obviously follows DeFi, and you're part of this DAO, and you guys are heavily invested in DeFi. When you look at protocols like Uniswap, and just essentially all these DEXs in the DeFi sector, how much of it is people actually using it as a utility to saying, hey, I want a cheap way. I have USDT and I want a cheap way to change it to USDC. How many people are using like that? And how much of it is being used on these more speculative type of tools where it's, I'm going to utilize these to yield farm, which it seems to be heavily based off of kind of speculation. It seems to be based off of, as long as more people are going into it, it'll keep on going up. But kind of like a Ponzi, once it's done, it's going to come crashing down. You don't want to be holding the bag. So what percentage you think of this right now in the space is kind of just, hey, this is a great, cheaper alternative to centralized finance, and how much of this is pure speculation?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the last month, there have been a lot of like crazy rewards offered, and I think the majority of them have just been good old pump and dumps. And like once the liquidity runs dry, okay, let's hop on to the next food item on the menu. So, you know, people are gonna go where they can get the highest returns and or purchase things at the lowest price. So that is the power of having like strong liquidity, because it offers, you know, the best prices, and it's kind of like a free market thing.
And is there a danger here, you think, that that the, let's say, I won't say the nefarious side, but like the greedy side here is going to cause harm to the actual progress of like the real true people who are just trying to build something here?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We have protocols that aren't being audited, and they're attracting hundreds of millions in total value locked in days, and it's kind of unheard of, and it's kind of frightening seeing how much is being staked into code that hasn't really been checked or verified to not just drain all your funds in an instant. So, but that's just kind of that also speaks to like how crazy the rewards have been, because they've been high enough for people to just not care and be kind of degenerate in chasing these yields, even if they're short term.
Right.
So
and by the way, this is all happening while the Ethereum network is highly congested and sky high gas fees. So if and when Ethereum figures out you know, the gas fee issue, whether it be, you know, layer 1, layer 2, Ethereum 2.0, which I want to touch upon soon, but when they do figure that out, and let's say transaction throughput rises or transactions are cheaper to do, how does that affect, you know, this aspect, the downstream? How does that affect DeFi? Where, you know, does that make it infinitely more scalable? Does that lower the values, raise the values? Does it affect?
Of course. I think yeah, we're seeing it in action right now, where proposals are not being as voted on by the dxDAO, just because gas prices are incredibly high, like $50-$60 to, you know, across, you know, you have to do across multiple transactions. So it's kind of prohibiting it in many ways. And I think this is a good way to like lead into another product from the dxDAO coming out called Rails. And it is a layer 2 solution using Loopring's ZK rollup. So what it allows people to do is log in with their MetaMask, transfer funds to the second layer, and once they're on that second layer, they can send Ether or ERC20 tokens to anybody who's also on that second layer for free and instantly. So that is an innovation that will be launched within a week or so. And in a later update to Loopring's ZK rollup, you'll be able to transfer funds from that layer 2 to anybody's layer 1 address, which I think is going to be like super exciting, like free and instant transactions on Ethereum really soon.
But there's no such thing in life as free. So kind of what is the incentive? What is powering this layer 2?
Exactly.
If there's no fees or money going on,
totally good question. So Loopring is handling the back end of that, and the dxDAO is kind of governing and working on the front end. So the fees on the ZK rollup are, as of now, so negligibly low that Loopring, as you know, is offering to just kind of pay for the fees, because it's like 0.0006 cents or something like that. Right. So it's just, you know, it's going to start off free to kind of attract the users. And of course, if people abuse it for some like party destroying and like reason, then there'll probably be like fees involved, but they'll still be negligibly low compared to what we have today in layer 1.
And you know, one of the big, let's say, hurdles that layer 2 solutions have had to overcome is the security aspect, because, the reason that there is so much DeFi on Ethereum and so popular there is because the network has been tested, not necessarily on throughput, but tested on security. That they won't get hacked, it won't fail. What happens on the network, I can believe, I can trust. And so, are layer 2 solutions there yet? Have they figured out kind of that same layer of trust where I could rely on the layer 2 as much as I can rely on layer 1?
Yeah, and I think that's a really good question. I know that is like an issue being looked at by a lot of these like layer 2 solutions, and I think they're being taken with different like levels of attention. All I can say that I think an even or just as big hurdle is that user experience, because it does require some knowledge and like know-how in order to utilize these layer 2 solutions. So even if that security was satisfactorily figured out, like it still requires that someone knows how to transfer their funds to the second layer, and it might take some time to do. I know loopring sometimes it takes 30 minutes or a couple hours to get it on there. So there's definitely like a gap, like a hoop to jump through, and that's just a matter of like making the UX easier or better informing the community on how to do it. I think the incentive of free and gasless, like instant transactions, that's enough for people to just like take a second and figure out how to do that.
Right. And the whole discussion of layer 2 solutions essentially, I don't know fully, but in many ways becomes outdated or useless if Ethereum 2.0 actually does come out, actually scales, has low, essentially no fees or low fees. What is the likelihood of that happening this year? Is Ethereum 2.0 going to happen this year? And if not, when? I mean, hearing about it forever, I understand. And it makes sense why they're taking the time, because there's a lot of money on the network. It's making a lot of people a lot of money on the network. So are they in a rush? Because is the incentive there for them to be in a rush?
Yeah.
And when will that happen?
So like this is interesting because there's a prediction market product that the dxDAO has called Omen, and one of the biggest prediction markets there is, will ETH version 0 launch this year? And that was the biggest prediction. Like there's been news articles of that prediction market, and it was 50-50 for a long time. I don't know what the staking is right now for each side. But there have even been like Ethereum developers like participating in the market and tweeting about it and say like, okay, this is what the crowd wants. Let's work harder on it. So I think that's a really interesting discussion. I think it's like basically a coin flip.
And by the way, speaking about Omen, in this kind of prediction markets, these, I know when they first came out, there was it even hit the mainstream, this kind of unique use case where it could kind of be an anonymous hitman platform where essentially, if you wanted to get someone killed, you would predict that they are going to die on that day for a large sum of money, and pretty much you would incentivize someone to take that bet because they would then kill them. As in, it was a really interesting use case. Yes, and that has kind of I haven't heard about that in a while, but when that came out, and that brings me to a certain point where it's kind of interesting, where dxDAO is investing and voting on projects, technology, and everyone here is kind of, this technology is so young, and we assume that the technology will be used in one way, and we're building amazing capabilities. But it's so interesting because even like the internet, the capabilities, the end result, the use cases don't always match up with how the developers
of course.
See it happening.
The dxDAO and Kleros like do collaborate with the curation of these prediction markets. So like there are prediction markets that are very poorly input and and have bad resolution dates or just aren't even questions. And like, I think the distinction of Omen is that there's a DAO that cares about like the validity of these markets and has like ethical standards in place to like verify and curate these markets. So there are features in place and also more rolling out that kind of ensure like these are valid markets and they follow these guidelines, and do not pay attention to these because XYZ, they don't follow these guidelines, they're unethical. So it's not like left completely open for the community to kind of take advantage of and perform like unethical like acts. Like there is some form of like governance and moderation, even though this whole thing is permissionless.
All right, rapid fire round time. Describe DeFi in one. Describe DeFi in one word.
Financial. That's the one word.
All right, I'll give
financial freedom.
Financial freedom. I'll give it. That's a. We'll put a hyphen in between them. Financial freedom accounts. Okay, sushi or yam?
Sushi.
Sushi. Interesting. I'm more of a vegetable guy myself. Okay, and then right now, last question before I let you go. We spoke a little bit before about the potential for DAOs in the real world, because right now, essentially, its main use is kind of for things that could be tracked on chain, and that's kind of a big limitation to blockchain overall. Is kind of this the input output of going for there's oracles that try to fix that. But essentially, there's an issue that the blockchains are trustless, they're immutable, but trusting the information going in is kind of tough. So what is the potential for DAOs in the real world when considering the limitations of connecting the actual decision making of the DAOs to an action in the real world?
Do I still have to answer with one word?
No. This could be kind of tough to answer this one in one question.
So that's a totally good question, because like DAOs as of now can only like execute things that are connected to the blockchain. So there have been proposals in the dxDAO that don't have like on-chain like execution and function mainly as like signals. So someone signals like, I think one day we should have such and such. Like there's one proposal of like, let's explore the idea of staking tokens for voting power, and it passed, and then like we explored that idea. So like,
so I guess it's interesting because then it kind of becomes proof of stake, where you could see a world where there's a DAO whose job it is to verify off-chain actions, where essentially the DAO is voting on whether this action occurred or not off-chain.
Of course.
And so it kind of turns into proof of stake where the majority rules, and if there's an incentive for the majority to tell the truth there, then there could be a kind of a DAO solution. I don't want to say DAO, but a decentralized solution to truth off-chain.
Yeah, of course. I think transparency like always matters, and the blockchain doesn't always capture all information like required or that is part of the situation. Like people submit work proposals and say, I'm going to do this and this and that, and I'm requesting this much, partly up front, partly once I'm done. That proposal gets executed, they work for their engagement, and then towards the end, when they ask for the second half of their compensation, they'll say, I did this, you can verify through these links, and here you go.
Right.
So, but those links don't point to anything on chain,
Interesting. Well, thank you so much, Ingamar. That's all the time we have. But thank you so much for taking the time to kind of, explain to us. You're in the room where it happens. You're part of a DAO, so the room door is always open. But many people don't take the opportunity to actually go and sit in. So we appreciate you taking the time to kind of explain to us what goes on in the room where it happens, and given your wonderful thoughts on DeFi as well. So I appreciate you taking the time, and for all our viewers at home for Reimagine 2020, I'm Yonah Hochhauser. Thanks for watching.
All right. Join our Keybase.